Nisayama in January 2020. We see a boy running through the forest at night. Suddenly, he falls, and we hear a voice calling out Hikaru's name. Another voice asks if they've found him. The boy gets up from the ground, grabs a flashlight, and keeps going. We hear the voice again calling for Hikaru, and saying it's no use. We hear another person saying they can't search here and should turn back. Meanwhile, the boy runs through the darkness of the rain-soaked forest, as if he's looking for something. We see an injured person saying Yoshiki. Then we see a backpack lying on the ground, and the boy calls out Hikaru, but he gives up when he sees it's just a tree trunk, and continues running. After that, we see a pained eye saying, "The great Unoki," and that he needs someone. Then we see the boy shouting Hikaru. Suddenly, we see an injured boy lying on the ground reaching out for help. Then, we shift to a bright morning. In the village of Kobatashi in July 2020, we hear a boy asking for some ice cream. He says the weather is nice and cool. Another boy responds, "This is all they have here," and shares the ice cream with another boy. He asks what the story is with the spelling mistakes here. We see two friends sitting together, one complaining to the other that the damn Mr. Hara is forcing them to wander under the scorching sun. One of them responds saying, "Hikaru, you need to watch your words." It becomes clear that the boy with blonde hair is Hikaru. He tells his friend, "You have a point," and starts eating the ice cream. His friend reminds him that they lost him for a whole week on that mountain, but Hikaru doesn't remember this. The boy is puzzled because his friend Hikaru doesn't recall it, even after half a year since the incident. Hikaru asks his friend what he's trying to achieve with these questions. His friend replies that they were extremely worried about him that day. Hikaru then asks his friend if he felt alone without him, and his friend answers no. But Hikaru calls him a liar, insisting he must have been crying and saying, "Hikaru, don't leave me alone." His friend puts his hands on his head. Hikaru feels upset at that moment and looks at his friend, accusing him of bullying him for being small. It becomes clear they were sitting at the school bus stop. We hear Hikaru's friend wanting to ask him a strange question. Hikaru jokes with him, asking if he will confess his love for him. His friend denies it, and clarifies that he's been thinking about something for a while. During this, we see a shadow looming over them. Hikaru's friend continues and says, "You're not Hikaru, are you?" Hikaru is surprised by his friend's words, saying he thought he was mimicking him perfectly. Suddenly, we see a face from which something strange emerges. His friend is astonished by this and drops the ice cream from his hands. Hikaru approaches his friend, his face showing this strange thing, and hugs him, asking him not to tell anyone. He continues, saying he found immense pleasure in living as a human, explaining that it's a real joy for him, and asks him not to tell anyone because he doesn't want to be killed. His friend falls silent, unable to speak from shock, and it becomes clear that Hikaru is gone with no way to change that. His friend cries and promises not to tell anyone about it. After a while, we hear someone asking what Hikaru will do after graduating from Kibugayama High School. We see that Hikaru has grown older. He explains that he doesn't know what he'll do after graduation, and continues that he'll work on his grandfather's farm. Then he looks at the person speaking and asks, "What about you, Yoshiki?" It becomes clear that his friend's name is Yoshiki. Yoshiki tells him he also doesn't know what he'll do after high school. Hikaru tells him he's smart and must leave the village and go to college in Tokyo. He jokes with him, saying, "You don't want to leave me, right?" We see Hikaru walking in the village telling Yoshiki that even if he finds a girlfriend in Tokyo, he will never leave Yoshiki's house so that Yoshiki won't take her away. We hear Yoshiki say, as if he could find a girlfriend. Hikaru tells him that he always frowns when talking about that, assuring him that he will find a girlfriend easily. After that, we see Hikaru walking, and Yoshiki puts his hand on him and asks how he is. Yoshiki asks Hikaru about the weekend. Hikaru tells him he's going to the mountains. Yoshiki asks why the mountains. Hikaru tells him it's a secret. Then we see Yoshiki waking up suddenly in his room. We hear someone saying, "Wake up, Yoshiki. Breakfast is ready." Meanwhile, Yoshiki is convincing himself it was just a dream about the last day he was alive. He continues, "The last thing he saw was mimicking Mr. Hara." We see him in pain on his bed, and someone calling out to him, saying breakfast is ready. We see Yoshiki coming down the stairs and seeing two women. One of the women asks him how he is and why he was awake all night. After that, we find Yoshiki having breakfast with someone, and he hears the weather news, and learns that this summer will be scorching. The person asks him about Kaoru. Is she still sleeping? And we see her sleeping. Then we return to Yoshiki, who is browsing on his phone. We hear a woman say Hikaru has arrived. Yoshiki gets up and goes, and we see Hikaru saying good morning. Yoshiki looks at him, leaves his house, and tells him they need to hurry now, otherwise, they'll be late. Hikaru looks at him and agrees, so they won't be scolded by Mr. Hera. We see Yoshiki and Hikaru walking down the road. Hikaru talks about his mom who prepared food and they gobbled it up. Meanwhile, Yoshiki looks at him and thinks to himself, it doesn't matter who Hikaru is, he's better than not being around. After that, we see someone named Tanaka carrying a bag with a hamster knocking on a door in a building. His company sent him to Kibugayama High School. In the next scene, we see a group of students practicing a song, including Yoshiki, with a schoolmate next to him mocking him as he sings. Yoshiki looks over at Hikaru, who's gazing in shock. Then we shift to Tanaka, who breaks into a room, followed by a man and a woman, and says there's something suspicious. He looks at a spot in the room and says yes, it's there. Then we see the student singing, while Tanaka rummages through the room. Suddenly, we see the face of a strange creature on the wall of the room as if it's singing along with the students. We see Tanaka breaking into a part of the room. Meanwhile, a teacher says there's talent among the students. Then we switch to Tanaka, who successfully breaks into this place. Next, we see Yoshiki's and Hikaru's classmate complaining on the stairs that he's exhausted and asks why there's a singing party among all the activities. Yoshiki explains that he thinks it's a compensation for last year's cancelled cultural festival. We hear Hikaru say he liked singing. Yoshiki says you didn't sing, you were just staring at the paper. Hikaru clarifies that he was curious to know the meaning of the song's lyrics. During this, two girls appear from behind and ask where they're going. They explain they don't have a science class but have a meeting in the classroom and will watch a movie. Here, Hikaru gets excited. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka talking on the phone, explaining that there's not a single atom related to this thing. We hear the voice on the line saying this is disappointing. Tanaka says it seems the company hasn't learned anything after centuries of research, and he can't believe it still exists. We see the girl talking to him in a deserted place, telling him to stop complaining about their company because someone might inform the managers. Tanaka reassures her not to worry because he takes his work seriously. He hangs up and goes to the room to see the man and woman hugging. He looks at them, thinking this will not be easy to find. We see the students in the classroom watching a movie. Yoshiki doesn't like this movie and looks at Hikaru, who is watching the film and crying. Yoshiki asks him why he's crying. Hikaru explains that they have seen this movie 5 times. He tells him that he knows it and it's stored in his memory, but for him, it's like watching it for the first time. Afterwards, we see Hikaru standing with Yoshiki, looking for his key. Yoshiki advises him to check his bag. At this moment, a girl asks her friend if she's practicing at home. We see Hikaru searching his bag for the key, and the two girls are joking with each other. Finally, Hikaru finds his key. We see a group of students about to play music. Yoshiki says to Hikaru, "Let's go." The students start playing music, and we see scenes from the school, students, and classrooms. Hikaru and Yoshiki walk and talk to each other, while players are playing baseball and others are playing volleyball. We see Hikaru and Yoshiki riding their bike down the road. We notice a sign for a shopping area on Daruma Street. Hikaru and Yoshiki see a poster for Master X Master, and Hikaru smiles. Then we see Hikaru holding food and looking very happy, looking at Yoshiki and saying they've eaten this sometimes. Yoshiki replies yes. Hikaru devours the food and shouts that this food is really delicious. Yoshiki advises him to lower his voice and wonders if he remembers the food experience, yet it feels new. Hikaru clarifies at that moment that he can recall memories, but not the experiences themselves. He explains that he wasn't alive before, and this is his first experience as a person. Yoshiki wonders if he is a ghost. Hikaru responds that he doesn't know. Then we see a cat approach them, and he continues that it's a fierce beast. The cat comes closer, and we learn its name is Mine. Yoshiki explains that this cat has grown big because the butcher feeds it meat all the time. Hikaru approaches the cat. Suddenly, the cat screams and runs away in fear of Hikaru. Hikaru is happy with the cat's quick escape. Yoshiki looks at that sadly and fearfully. Yoshiki asks Hikaru if there's anywhere he wants to visit in town. Hikaru asks him if he will go with him. He's surprised by Yoshiki because he's being nice to him. Yoshiki clarifies that it's not kindness but rather lenience for everyone, especially for himself. Hikaru doesn't understand what Yoshiki means, but he sees that he's always nice to him. Then we see an elderly lady standing outside a restaurant, asking for food. But when Hikaru rides past her, the woman panics and looks at him as he rides his bike. We see the friends walking on a bridge over water. Hikaru notices a dragonfly sitting on a bike. Yoshiki explains that the summer red dragonfly is completely different from the autumn red dragonfly. Hikaru asks him about the difference, but Yoshiki doesn't want to explain that now. He says that the autumn and summer red dragonflies are very similar, yet are 2 different types of dragonflies. Hikaru responds saying that's why they call you Emil. Yoshiki leaves him and wonders what this thing looks like. Hikaru but isn't. Hikaru asks him to wait for him. Yoshiki stands talking to himself, saying this is madness because he's humorously playing along with it and that he's really scared, not understanding why, and is almost losing his mind, but says even if this Hikaru is fake, he wants him to stay. Meanwhile, Hikaru asks him that he wants to continue reading Master X Master. Yoshiki looks at him and agrees, then looks at a spider house, and asks where he got to in his reading, and he understands from Hikaru that he's still at the beginning. He tells him he can continue reading at home, but he doesn't have the third part. Hikaru asks Yoshiki why he has 11 copies of the first part. At this moment, we see an old woman standing in front of them screaming, saying in panic why the great Nonuki has descended from the mountain. Hikaru wonders what she means, but Yoshiki tells him not to interfere. He explains these things frighten him. Hikaru understands this and takes a step back, but the woman panics from him and runs away, yelling for him to go away, and she enters her house and shuts the door. Yoshiki asks Hikaru to leave, but Hikaru's eyes turn red. After that, the friends reach the village, and Yoshiki asks Hikaru if the real Hikaru is dead. The fake Hikaru responds yes. He continues that his body is warm and his heart beats, but he is dead. He explains that when he found him, he was dying, and recounts what he remembers from that day, that he was wandering in the mountains for a long time, feeling nothing, and found Hikaru dying. Suddenly, he became like he is now. Yoshiki reaches the door of his house, and the fake Hikaru says, "See you tomorrow." Before he leaves, Yoshiki asks him if it pleases him. Hikaru is surprised and answers yes. Yoshiki thinks to himself this is the first time he says that, and tells him while crying not to leave him again, and goes into his house and closes the door. Hikaru leaves. Yoshiki dreams of this creature, and around him, people are talking, and we see a strange creature approaching the old woman's house. And the lady, scared, says go away. The creature speaks in a scary voice, asking her to open the door because he has a package for her. The lady, frightened, doesn't want to open it. At this moment, Yoshiki wakes up to the sound of his family, and we see the creature trying to enter the old woman's house, and Yoshiki is crying. The old lady says a package at this hour is unreasonable, and the creature knows she is inside, and repeats, "Oh, Lady Matsura." The lady screams and screams, and in this moment, we see Yoshiki crying. After that, silence falls in Lady Matsura's house. We hear Hikaru's voice saying he's inside. Lady Matsura turns her face and suddenly screams, and we hear Yoshiki's voice saying, "Good evening, Hikaru." After that, we see police standing in front of Lady Matsura's house, and she is identified by her daughter. Meanwhile, we see a man saying he is next. He continues that the great Nonuki is coming for him. During this, we see two men saying the endo rituals have failed. Then we move to Tanaka, who is on the phone with someone named Takeda, saying he will go there in the morning, and that he will offer help. He adds that he doesn't prefer to go to the village of Kobitashi, and that the villagers don't know what they are dealing with, and he won't be dealt with easily. The events begin with Hikaru shouting at Yoshiki to slow down as he is riding his bike quickly. However, Yoshiki suddenly stops, and Hikaru scolds him for doing so. Yoshiki stops because he sees a police car driving in front of him. He asks Hikaru what happened, and Hikaru responds that Mrs. Matsura passed away that morning. Yoshiki says her name was Matsura and remembers her face as she was screaming. Hikaru is happy because it's the first time he's seen a police car, and Yoshiki looks at him nervously. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka saying his car has approached the village. Then we see Hikaru standing in school with a teacher, and we hear a female student say, "Do you remember what Hera said this morning in class?" Yoshiki responds, "Is it about the old woman?" The girl replies, "Yes, she committed suicide by putting her fist into her throat." One of their friends shouts in fear, stating she must have seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Yoshiki looks at Hikaru, suspecting he might have a hand in the old woman's death. Another girl clarifies that the terrifying things happening recently are giving her nightmares. The friend who was scared thinks he might be cursed because he always takes the eastern mountain path to get home. Since the tunnel is under construction, he shortcuts through the forest, which he finds very scary. This makes the girl tense. The boy explains that he can't see well through the forest and feels frozen when he looks up. Suddenly, another girl exclaims that she loves this story. The friend asks Yoshiki to accompany him home, but Yoshiki refuses while looking at Hikaru. The friend asks why not and begs him as if it's a test of courage. Yoshiki responds that he'll leave that to the tourists they receive, but the friend pleads with him. Suddenly, Hikaru appears and says he is ready to go with them. Everyone is surprised and asks him if he's sure. One of the girls questions if he didn't faint while watching a horror movie. Hikaru clarifies that these things no longer scare him and asks Yoshiki, "Right?" Yoshiki looks at him nervously and answers, "Yes." The friend says that Yoshiki, Yuki, Asako, and Hikaru will accompany him home, and Asako explains that they will all be safe together. Meanwhile, Tanaka arrives at the village and apologizes for being late. A man from the village shouts at him for being too late. state. Tanaka asks to talk about it indoors due to the heat. We see an abandoned house, and we hear Tanaka talking to the villagers, and they employed him to investigate the matter. Tanaka breaks the glass of the door, and they all enter. They find the place disgusting. Tanaka asks the standing person, named Takeda, about his father. Takeda explains that his father is scared and refuses to leave his room to kill. Tanaka laughs upon hearing this. Takeda gets angry at him, grabs him by his clothes, and explains that people are dying in the village. He believes Tanaka's company came to ruin the place. Tanaka clarifies that allowing an ignorant company to change the land would have caused a disaster, but his company prevented it, so he must be thanked for that. Someone from the village says, "A company we wish we knew about, not just Mrs. Matsura, but there are strange things happening in the village, and the Endo family's son is missing." He continues that their rituals failed, leading to a worsening situation. We see the 5 friends have reached the forest and are looking at it fearfully. Asako asks Yuki if she is scared. Yuki replies that it's impossible. Suddenly, their friend screams in fear that he is very scared and might die, but they ignore his words and enter the forest while he follows them. Later, we see that they crossed the forest path without anything happening to them. Their friend thanks them for accompanying him home and wishes them caution on their way back. Meanwhile, we see old posters, and we hear Tanaka's voice saying, "The Great Nunoki." He explains that Mrs. must have seen something in her past. We hear the villagers say that she must have experienced a traumatic event in the mountains as a child, and she saw it. Tanaka searches and says this must have driven her mad. The villagers clarify that she wasn't like that, but her daughter disappeared without a trace. Tanaka asks if they knew her well, and continues that this woman was afraid of what was in the mountain, but the more scared she became, the more he was drawn to her. Meanwhile, we see the 4 friends in the forest. Yoshiki says they should return through the forest on foot. Asako finds it exhausting. Yuki clarifies that an insect bit her. Asako was happy about the weather. Yoshiki looks at her nervously, but while they walk, someone is watching them. Suddenly, Yoshiki sees a crooked white line in the forest, but this line changes shape. Yoshiki wonders what it is. He sees a figure with a long head swaying back and forth approaching him. Yoshiki gets scared, but he hears Hikaru saying to him, "I saw it, it's following you." He continues that this does not bode well, and its eyes are glowing red. Suddenly, we hear a commotion and see Hikaru screaming, blood coming from his nose. Meanwhile, we see Tanaka sitting with the villagers, and one of them asks why they came to Mikasa's house. Tanaka explains that he needed a safer place. He clarifies that he set up a barrier around the shrine in Mikasa's house, making everyone wonder. He continues that he visited the mountain this morning and found this bag there. We hear one of the villagers say that it was the bag Kohei used. They ask if Hikaru took it to the mountain. Tanaka tells them to look at what he found inside, and they get scared when they see a black stone with a face. Tanaka is confident it was someone's head. They wonder why this thing is in the bag. Tanaka replies, "Who knows, maybe it's for exorcising spirits in the forest." He holds it and smiles, saying it will not harm them as long as the stone is with them. He initially thought this thing had something to do with desecrating the mountain. A man from the village asks if the desecration of the mountain is gone. Tanaka responds that it's an exaggeration to attribute everything to it, especially after what happened with the grandma. Yakita asks what he means. He explains that it came down from the mountain. Everyone is astonished. Tanaka continues, saying it is hidden and lurking. One of them says that Yuki was right. Kabutan asks, "What should we do now?" Tanaka asks them if he can search now. We return to the friends, hearing the noise, and see Asako in pain, pressing her hand against her head, asking, "What is this noise?" She falls to the ground. Yuki calls to her, and suddenly we see Asako grab Yuki's hand and pull her, and they run through the forest. In this moment, Yoshiki wakes Hikaru, who opens his eyes. Yoshiki asks him if he's okay. Hikaru puts his hands on his nose and responds that it's just a nosebleed. He asks if Yoshiki has any tissues. Yoshiki replies no. He asks Yoshiki what he did. Hikaru clarifies that this thing wanted to stick to Yoshiki, so he crushed it and ate it. He adds, it seems he absorbed it or swallowed it, but it overwhelmed him, causing a nosebleed. Hikaru warns Yoshiki not to look at anything but him. He adds that it's chasing him because he looked at it and he is the only one allowed to cling to him. Yoshiki gets surprised at this, but Hikaru pulls him by his shirt and accuses him of ignorance, ordering him not to look at it and to tell him if he sees something else. Yoshiki asks him to stop pulling his shirt. Meanwhile, Asuka and Yuki were watching them from outside the forest. They apologize for leaving them, but see Hikaru bleeding. Hikaru explains that he fell. Yuki confirms they heard a loud popping sound. Hikaru responds that maybe someone accidentally fired a starting gun and tells them to calm down. that nothing happened. Asako wonders if that sound seemed that way to them. The scary feeling about the forest disappears, and Hikaru looks at her with his red eyes. Asako continues and asks if they all canceled each other out. Yoshiki asks Hikaru if he is sure he hasn't been hurt. Hikaru clarifies that he doesn't know what pain feels like. Suddenly, Hikaru looks at Yoshiki as if examining him and tells himself he doesn't have to take him. He'll stick with him anyway. Suddenly, we see fire. Hikaru smiles and inwardly says, "I'll make sure it doesn't take me away." Then we see burning fragments of fire and hear someone say, "Hikaru, if you find a woman you like, hurry up and marry her." Hikaru replies, "What happens if I don't?" The person replies that the great Onoki will drag her to the mountain and that it's the Endo family rule and they have an agreement not to harm their family. She will be safe if you marry her. We hear Hikaru ask, "Why does he take people?" The person replies, "Because he is lonely. He won't take our family, but he will take someone close to us," and clarifies that it's just a legend. Hikaru replies in bewilderment. He feels lonely. Later, at school, we see Yoshiki and Hikaru in a room, and Yoshiki wants to understand how Hikaru swallowed that thing. Hikaru opens his shirt for Yoshiki and tells him to look at it. Yoshiki looks at him and is shocked when he sees a slit in Hikaru's stomach, and Hikaru asks him, "Do you want to put your hands inside?" Yoshiki puts his hands inside and screams, and Hikaru grabs his hand. Yoshiki explains that there is something strange inside. Hikaru asks him, "What's the texture like?" Yoshiki answers that it feels like raw, marinated chicken, and cold. Hikaru says, "You're kind of warm," and continues that it's been a long time since he's felt something alive inside him, and asks him to put his hands further inside. Yoshiki puts his hands further inside, and Hikaru feels happy, and here Yoshiki felt something pulling him in, so he quickly pulled his hand out, and Hikaru laughs and asks him, "Did that scare you?" Yoshiki asks him, "What is that?" and wipes his hand. Hikaru asks him, "Didn't you like that feeling?" Yoshiki puts his hands on Hikaru's head and tells him to close his shirt buttons and asks him, "Are you a caveman?" Hikaru replies, "Maybe," and Yoshiki laughs. And in the store, we see a woman shopping, and she sees the saleswoman talking to Yoshiki and asks him about his younger sister, and Yoshiki looks at her. The saleswoman continues that his sister is absent from school a lot, and the Yamazakis were worried because they said she can't get up early, and she chatters a lot while ringing him up, and Yoshiki didn't talk to her, and she gives him the change in his hands, and Yoshiki leaves the store and remembers the feeling when his hand was inside Hikaru and approaches his bicycle. Suddenly, we see someone grabbing his hand and asking him to stop immediately. Yoshiki looks to see that the woman who was in the store is telling him that he is in big trouble. Yoshiki asks her, "What did I do?" The woman explains to him that he is approaching something extremely dangerous and advises him to stay away from him or he will become mixed. Yoshiki is surprised and asks her, "What is mixed?" The woman replies that it is difficult to explain and continues that if he mixes with him too much, he will no longer be human. Yoshiki asks her, "Who are you?" The woman replies in concern that he shouldn't be afraid, that she is just a housewife who happened to pass by here and that she sees things that others don't see, and asks him, "Do you know the forbidden area in the mountains near Kobitashi village?" She continues that she has felt a terrifying air emanating from it for a while. Yoshiki recounts that this is the mountain where his friend Hikaru was lost. The woman continues that suddenly everything disappeared recently and wonders where this terrifying feeling disappeared to and asks him if that feeling is accompanying him now. Yoshiki asks her, "Why? Do you know something?" The woman replies, "Not really," and continues that she is sure there is something going on and it can't continue like this, and waits for him and says she has never seen a case like this before and continues that there must be his own reasons. Yoshiki remembers Hikaru. The woman continues that Yoshiki should call her when he is ready to talk and gave him her number, and at night, Yoshiki, while in his bed, looks at the woman's name on his phone, and it's called Rei Kurubayashi, and then Yoshiki remembers all the events that happened to him during the day, especially his hand inside Hikaru, and closes his eyes and imagines Hikaru calling his name and repeating it, and suddenly says, "Stop," and Yoshiki opens his eyes and imagines Hikaru telling him that it's a secret, and smiles and falls asleep. We see Yoshiki and Hikaru looking younger. Hikaru tells Yoshiki that he was inspired by watermelons, as shown in comic books. Yoshiki is disgusted with Hikaru. Suddenly, Hikaru is shocked because he swallowed a seed. Hikaru explains that a friend's father swallowed a watermelon seed before and turned into a striped watermelon man. Yoshiki asks what happened to him after that, and Hikaru replies that he died. Yoshiki explains that he also swallowed a watermelon seed. They both cry. Meanwhile, Hikaru's father was watching them. He approaches approached them and asked why they were crying. They ask him for help. He reassures them that they will be fine. After that, we see Yoshiki carrying a watermelon. He looks at his phone at the name of the lady he met at the store, but Yoshiki puts his phone in his pocket. Then he goes to Hikaru's house and calls for him. Hikaru's mother appears. She seems happy to see Yoshiki. He gives her the watermelon he bought. Hikaru's mother thanks him. Then we see Yoshiki looking at Hikaru, who is sleeping on the floor, and Yoshiki notices sweat on Hikaru's body. Yoshiki sits down. Suddenly, Hikaru pokes him with his foot and asks if he's just going to stare at him instead of waking him up. He compares him to the main character in an old video game. Suddenly, Hikaru hugs Yoshiki. Meanwhile, we see Hikaru's mother cutting the watermelon. Then we see Hikaru declaring victory over Yoshiki, who was sprawled on the floor behind him. He asks him if he brought them anything. Yoshiki answers that he brought a watermelon from his relatives. Hikaru is surprised because watermelon is his favorite fruit. Yoshiki knows that. Hikaru continues, "Did you devour it like in the comic books?" Yoshiki closes his eyes and replies that he knows that too. Hikaru looks at him in surprise. Yoshiki and Hikaru, who is happily eating watermelon, are sitting. Yoshiki asks him, "Do you remember the taste of watermelon?" Hikaru answers yes, and that he can now eat quickly. Hikaru devours the watermelon quickly. Yoshiki is disgusted by him, but he explains that it's amazing. At this moment, Hikaru tells him that he swallowed a seed, and he explains that he will become a watermelon man now. Yoshiki looks at him and falls silent. Hikaru suggests to Yoshiki that they play a game, but Yoshiki is not in the mood to play. Hikaru understands that. We see Hikaru's mother talking on the phone. Meanwhile, Yoshiki remembers when he and Hikaru were young, eating watermelon. He remembers Hikaru saying that he swallowed a seed and would turn into a watermelon man. Yoshiki falls silent and drifts off. We see pictures of sunflowers, and we see memories of Hikaru in the forest, and when he returned, we see Hikaru sleeping on the ground, and Yoshiki puts his hand on his face and explains that he can't do this alone, and act as if everything is normal. We hear Hikaru telling Yoshiki that hanging out with him is fun, and he thanks him for the watermelon. Yoshiki still has his hand on his face and asks Hikaru what's on his mind. Hikaru replies that he doesn't know, but he made sure Yoshiki knew his feelings. Yoshiki whispers that this is exactly what he should have done. Then we see Hikaru sleeping and Yoshiki standing in front of him. He notices that Hikaru is sleeping again and deeply asleep. He looks at an old photo of himself with Hikaru and his father. Yoshiki explains that Hikaru's father died a long time ago, when he went to the mountain, and that it was around this time that Hikaru went to the mountain. He looks at another picture and wonders what the meaning of Hikaru's facial expressions is, describing him as a fool. Yoshiki continues that Hikaru was the only child in the village his age, and that they spent their entire lives together, but the Hikaru in the pictures is gone. Thoughts revolve in his mind that he can't continue, and that the Hikaru in the pictures is gone, and that he won't accept this. Suddenly, Yoshiki spits. Then we see Yoshiki holding his phone and looking at the lady's name, and he wants to call. Hikaru speaks in his sleep about eating watermelon rind. Yoshiki sends a message to the lady. At this moment, Hikaru's mother calls him to help her. Yoshiki goes and leaves his phone on the table next to the sleeping Hikaru. After that, the lady sends a message asking Yoshiki if he is ready to talk. At the same moment, Hikaru wakes up. He sees the name Miss Kuribayashi, and he wonders who this is. After that, outside the store, Yoshiki stands. We see a message from the lady that she will be there in 5 minutes. At this moment, the lady arrives. She tells Yoshiki that the weather is very hot and asks him if he wants to eat. Yoshiki agrees. At the restaurant, we see Yoshiki sitting with the lady. The lady is happy when she sees on the menu that they have giant ice cream. She asks Yoshiki to order something. She asks him if he wants ice cream. Yoshiki quickly replies, "Okay." The lady understands here that Yoshiki wants to talk. She asks him what happened. Time passes, and we understand that Yoshiki told her everything. The lady understands that Hikaru is his close friend. The lady thanks him for telling her everything, and that he tried hard. Yoshiki bursts into tears and asks her why she is saying this. The lady explains that he should not punish himself, and that he should think logically, and she continues, "Being subjected to punishment by someone is only a way to make things easier for you, and it doesn't make a difference to the dead, but you must face the truth. We hold on to our loved ones, whom we have lost." Yoshiki asks in surprise, "We?" The lady apologizes to him and explains that she didn't mean to be bleak, and she continues, "If you two were mingling, you must have been close." Here we hear the waitress's voice asking them for their order. The lady tells her to bring 2 bowls of ice cream. After that, the lady asks Yoshiki if he noticed any strange events happening recently, whether in the city or the village, and that there was a malfunction somewhere. And she asks him, "Is this strange to you, isn't it?" And she continues that they are receiving visitors who should not be here, and that madness has begun to spread over the city and villages. Yoshiki looks at her in surprise. The lady continues that in her opinion, the cause of all this is that thing that replaced his friend Hikaru, and she continues, as if it were a massive mass of something, as if it were a creature from hell. And the moment I noticed its disappearance from the mountain, that distortion spread like wildfire, and she believes that it must be in the mountain to prevent the spread of this distortion. The lady asks Yoshiki if he remembers the woman who died in Kubitachi village, and she confirms that her death is related to the matter, and she explains that she is scared and wants to leave the city, but her daughter and mother-in-law are with her, and her eldest son left a while ago. Yoshiki asks her that she said, "Both of us," a little while ago, so what did she mean by both of us? The lady tells him that her husband came home one day, but things went badly, and he caused a wound to her son that never heals, and that she is willing to sacrifice so that he can return to her life again. And she asks Yoshiki that he knows he cannot stay with his friend in this way. And Yoshiki asks her what he should do. The lady tells him that she doesn't want him to end up like her, and that she saw that he should see the truth, so that he can get over it. And the waitress brings them the ice cream, and Yoshiki looks at her and drifts off. After that, at school, the weather is very rainy. We see a student saying that she forgot her umbrella, and we see students training. Then we see Yoshiki sitting alone in the classroom. Meanwhile, Hikaru was looking for him everywhere, and a student comes and greets Hikaru and asks her, "Did you see Yoshiki?" The student answers no. Yuki enters Yoshiki's classroom and asks him, "Are you still here?" Yoshiki explains to her that he forgot something. Yuki looks at him and tells him that Hikaru is looking for him, so he asked her to tell him to go home without him if she saw him. Yoshiki sits in the classroom and remembers Hikaru hugging him and telling him that he doesn't want to kill him. Yoshiki understands that Hikaru can kill him if he wants to, and the great Nonoki continues that it's something hidden in that mountain, and he continues, "The mysterious death of Miss Matsura, a malfunction in the village," and he asks, "What are you, Hikaru?" And he remembers the lady's words when she told him to get over it. This voice repeats in his head, and at this moment, Hikaru finds him and tells him that he finally found him, and he asks him to go home together. Yoshiki tells him to go without him today. Hikaru asks him, "Are you in a bad mood today?" Yoshiki answers yes. Hikaru tries to make him laugh, and Hikaru is shocked that he doesn't laugh. He asks him, "What's wrong?" and he puts his hand on his shoulder, and we see Yoshiki removing his hand from him and asking him to get lost. Hikaru asks him, "Are you serious about that?" And he asks him, "Is it his fault?" Yoshiki looks at him and asks him, "What thing?" Hikaru explains to him that his mood is bad. Is he angry with him? Yoshiki tells him that he is not angry. So Hikaru asks him, "What's wrong with you today? Are you hiding something from me?" Yoshiki looks and asks him, "What are all these questions?" And he scolds him. Hikaru gets angry and asks him what he was doing on the weekend. And why is he messaging a strange lady? Yoshiki hesitates but tells him that he doesn't want to tell him anything. Hikaru gets angrier and explains that he used to tell him everything. Yoshiki angrily says, "Formerly," and he continues that Hikaru talks about past memories as if they belong to him. Hikaru looks at him in shock, and he understands the matter, that he is angry because he is not the real Hikaru. Suddenly, he grabs Yoshiki's hand tightly, and he asks him if he is not good enough for him, and we see Hikaru transforming into something strange. But Yoshiki explains that he resembles Hikaru in every way, but he is not him. Suddenly, we see Hikaru's eyes glow red, and he tells him that he is right, and Yoshiki is surprised, and Hikaru presses harder on Yoshiki's hand. And we see the creature appear, and Hikaru tells Yoshiki that he cannot continue without Yoshiki because he needs him. We hear Yoshiki asking him to leave, and that he doesn't need him, and that he is a fake person. Hikaru suddenly doesn't know how to describe his feelings now, and Yoshiki looks at him in astonishment and remembers the lady's words that they cannot stay together. Hikaru at this moment screams and cries and tells Yoshiki that he cannot stop himself from loving him, and suddenly we see the creature coming out of Hikaru's head, and Yoshiki watches this in shock, and the creature rushes from Hikaru's head upwards, and suddenly it falls on Yoshiki, and we see Hikaru's body lying on Yoshiki, and we see the creature covering Yoshiki's body, and we hear memories, and Yoshiki asks what the creature is doing, and he understands that it is invading his body, and we see memories. And Yoshiki wonders if this is Hikaru, but it's not him. What is he carrying? And suddenly Yoshiki gets up and feels suffocated, and he looks at Hikaru, and here Hikaru cries and asks himself what he is doing and puts his hands on his face, and he explains that he cannot do that, and he apologizes to Yoshiki. After that, we see Hikaru taking his bag and walking away, and Yoshiki is still sitting in his place. Hikaru, before leaving, asks Yoshiki not to hate him. After that, at Yoshiki's house, we hear Yoshiki talking to himself about how this thing everything is a substitute for Hikaru, and that it's pitiful because he tried to ignore it all this time, and that it's impossible to replace Hikaru, and that he can't treat it like the real Hikaru. That's why he said what he said. The next day, we see Yoshiki in class alone, and he notices Hikaru is absent. Yuki and Asako come to him and ask about Hikaru and why he hasn't come to school. They ask him if they had a fight. Asako tells Yoshiki that they need to fix things between them, and adds that Hikaru has been obsessed with him lately. She asks him not to be rude to him. Yuki also tells him that Hikaru has been attached to him recently. Asako compares him to a child, and jokes with Yuki. Yoshiki is surprised and repeats the word child. He remembers Hikaru calling out to him, and recalls Hikaru's last words to him, which were, "Don't hate me." He tells them that he will leave. We see Yoshiki ride his bike quickly, and go to Hikaru's house and ask if he's there. Then he stands in front of Hikaru, who is fully covered, and sits in front of him, apologizing for what happened yesterday. We hear Hikaru asking why he is apologizing, and that he is the one who should apologize to him. Yoshiki tells him he's not angry anymore, and reaches out his hand towards Hikaru. When Hikaru pulls his hand away, Yoshiki is startled. Hikaru explains that Yoshiki is afraid of him. Yoshiki denies it, but Hikaru insists that he must be scared after seeing him in this disgusting state. Yoshiki remembers, but Hikaru interrupts him and asks if he hates him. Suddenly, Hikaru removes his cover and gets closer to Yoshiki, asking him to stay with him, and that's all he needs. He cries and begs him not to hate him, and that he knows he is an intruder in his friend's body, and apologizes to him. Yoshiki makes it clear that this isn't good, that he shouldn't get close, because it's dangerous. But he reaches out his hand to Hikaru's face, and tells him that he's more mischievous than the real Hikaru. Hikaru then asks if he's angry with him. Yoshiki answers no, that he's just a small, naughty, lonely boy. Hikaru asks him if what he feels is called loneliness. Yoshiki looks at him and tells him he doesn't know, and adds that he thinks this version of Hikaru doesn't know anything, and if he's that naive, then he should teach him a few things.